Hello everybody on lesterbanks.com. I am Daniel Brodeski and welcome to my new tutorial. In today's tutorial we are going to cover up the different techniques to create old movie style look inside of After Effects. Alright, so let's start by creating a new composition inside of After Effects. So Ctrl N on the keyboard, and I'm going to work in 1280 by 720, 25 frames per second, and I'm going to create a composition which is 5 seconds long with black background and call it main. I'm going to select my text tool from the toolbar over here and type wind, all in capital letters, and I'm going to use a very thin font. Let's center the text. I'm using reposition anchor point tool to center the anchor point, and with the text layer selected, click Ctrl Home. With the text layer selected, I'm going to layer and then create shapes from text. Now in my timeline I can see that I have my text outlines layer, which is basically a shape layer, and my text layer is disabled. With the shape layer selected, I'm going to the add drop down menu over here and add in a wiggle path. And now let's open the options for this transformer, and I'm going to decrease the size to around 2 and increase the wiggles per second to like 15. Maybe I'll even lower the detail to like 6. So you can see the text jiggles a little bit, and that's the exact effect I'm looking for. So I set up the size to be 1.5 and the detail to be 6, and it wiggles 15 times per second. You can play a little bit with these settings, but it doesn't really matter as long as it looks like this. It jiggles and wiggles every frame. And now I'm going to add the wiggle expression to its position property as well. So with the text selected, I'm going to click P, hold Alt on the keyboard and click once on the stopwatch to add an expression. Now just type wiggle, open brackets, and type 5.2, which means it's going to wiggle 2 pixels 5 times per frame. And maybe 2 is too much, so I'm going to decrease it to 1 pixel. And it just adds to the jiggling. Maybe I'll increase the wiggles per second to 7. And that's good. Let's now animate the text. With the text layer selected and the position property over here, I'm going to set a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline and another keyframe after 1 second. Make sure that the first keyframe holds the text of the screen, and then the text simply comes in, and we can enable the motion blur for the text. And using the easy ease, we will even add some overshooting animation to it. So I'm setting the ease in to be back and the type to be out, and then just click apply with the position selected. So it adds this overshooting to my text, but it eliminated the wiggle expressions. So to bring it back, I'm going to create a new null object. Ctrl Alt Shift Y on my keyboard to create a new null. With the null selected, Ctrl Shift Y to rename it, call it wiggle, and add the same wiggle expression to the position property as we did before. And then simply parent the text with the pickwick tool to the null. We can get rid of this text layer, which is over here, by simply deleting it from our timeline. And now we still have this effect going on. Alright, so that's the text. I'm going to pre-compose both of these layers. So Ctrl Shift C on the keyboard and call it text. Now I'm going to make the text layer invisible, so I have a clean screen to work with, and I'm going to select my pen tool from the toolbar over here and create a path which looks like wind blow, and it looks something like this with a nice loop and goes around like this. Now with the shape layer selected, over here we have the fill options, and I want to have it set to none. And as you can see, the stroke is also set to none, and I'm going to apply some stroke by simply selecting a white color, and we have a stroke width of 2 pixels, which is completely fine. You can change the paths which you have created by opening up the shape layer, going to contents, shape, and selecting the path, and now simply select the point which you want to move and adjust the handles to your liking. Just try to make a nice smooth shape, and I'm going to call it line number 1. With this shape layer selected, I'm going to this drop down menu over here, and I'm going to add a trim path. Now with this trim path added, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to animate the start and end values. First of all, let's animate the end value. At the beginning of the timeline, set a keyframe and another keyframe after 1 second. The first keyframe should be set to 0 and the other one to 100. So the line goes like this. And now we want the tail to go after the head. So after 5 frames, I'm going to set a keyframe for the start value, move a second forward, and set the start value to 100. And it gives us an animation which looks like this. A short line simply sweeping through our screen. And now I'm going to create a few other lines like this. So I'm going to speed up the video and come back to you when I'm done with the passes. So I'm done with creating these wind lines, and I have 4 of them, and the animation looks like this. Just a few nice wind lines sweeping across the screen, creating this nice moving motion. Notice that everything moves in the same direction, the text animation and the wind lines as well. I want to add the wiggle path I added to my text, so I'm going to open the pre-comp and I'm going to open up the wind outlines and find the wiggle path, copy it, Ctrl C on the keyboard, and simply paste it on all of the lines. And now if you zoom in a little, you can see that we have it over here. Now I can see too many corners, and so I want to adjust it just a bit. I'm going to open up one line and increase the detail to maybe 15 and the size to 2 or maybe 3. Let's solo this line just so we can focus on it. Try to set it to smooth. I think it looks a little better on smooth. So I'm going to have the settings set to 5 for the size and 15 for the detail. I'm still going to have the wiggles per second set to 15 times per second and the points to smooth. So the line looks like this, and I'm going to copy this wiggle path animator or deformer and paste it onto the other lines. I'm going to pre-compose these 4 lines, so select all 4 of them, Ctrl Shift C on the keyboard and call it wind lines. Now we have our basic elements. I'm going to make the wind lines comp invisible in the timeline, and now create a new solid layer, so Ctrl Y on the keyboard, and I'm going to call it BG. Make sure the solid is comp size and make it mid-gray color. From the effects and presets panel, I'm going to add the circle effect, and I'm going to invert it and set the blending mode to normal. Now let's increase the radius, set the color to black, and now increase the feather property and decrease the opacity to something around 70. So we have a simple background with a vignette which affects only the background. I'm going to place the background at the bottom of my layer stack. Let's now create another solid, Ctrl Y on the keyboard, and call it dust. Again, make sure it's comp size, and this time I'm going to make the solid black. From the effects and presets panel, let's add the fractal noise effect. I want to have only a few black dots here and there on my screen. So basically what I'm going to do is increase the contrast a little and increase the brightness a lot. And I'm also going to decrease the scale of the fractal noise and maybe the complexity as well to like 3, maybe 4. Let's keep increasing the brightness till we have fewer black dots on the screen. I'm going to open up the sub settings and decrease the sub influence from 70 to like 40, so I have simpler shapes. And I'm also going to decrease the sub scaling, so you can see more fractaling going on inside each of these dots or blobs or whatever it is. Decrease the scaling a bit more and maybe decrease the contrast, decrease the brightness a bit, and so we have something which looks like this. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now I want to have a different pattern of these blobs on my screen each frame. So let's open up the evolution options. Hold Alt on the keyboard and click once on the stopwatch for the random seed. Type random, open brackets, 0, 100, close brackets. And this is going to produce a different number for the seed from 0 to 100 every frame. And it looks like this. Now I want to overlay this effect on the rest of my comp. So let's change the blending mode. In case you don't have the blending mode visible, just toggle the switches. Change the blending mode to multiply. And it is basically going to eliminate all of the white parts and leave us only with the black parts. Let's decrease the opacity a little bit. Click T on the keyboard and set the opacity to around 50 or even lower. We want this effect to be subtle. And now let's add another solid. Ctrl Y on the keyboard and let's call it scratches. Let's add the fractal noise effect again. This time I'm going to open up the transform first and deselect the uniform scaling. Let's increase the scale width to like 5000 and decrease the scale height to 2. Maybe do the opposite. Increase the scale height to 5000 and the scale width to 2. So we have vertical lines instead of horizontal lines. Now do the same with the contrast and the brightness. Increase both of them to leave you with just a few black lines on the screen. And now do the same with the random seed. Add an expression which goes like this: random, open parentheses, 0, 100, close parentheses, and click away, and now you have it changing every frame. Now again, set the blending mode to multiply and lower the opacity. Now in case you want to pre-compose these elements, you can do it, but don't forget to set the blending mode for the pre-comp layer to be multiply as well. I'm going to leave these elements in my main comp. Let's turn on the wind lines and the text animation. I'm going to enter the wind lines pre-comp and turn on the motion blur for all of the lines. With the wind lines layer selected, I'm going to add the fast blur effect and increase the blurriness to only 1%, just so I don't have these sharp edges for my lines. With the wind lines selected, I'm going to lower its opacity to like 50% to match the colors of my whole comp. Now in the main comp, I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. Ctrl Alt Y on the keyboard. With the adjustment layer still selected, Ctrl Shift Y to rename it, and I'm going to call it frame rate. In the effects and presets panel, I'm going to type posterize, and here we have the posterize time effect. Let's add it to our adjustment layer, and I'm going to lower the frame rate to like 12. And now when run previewing this, you can see that we are getting a much stronger feel of a hand-drawn or old movie look effect. Now I'm also going to add the drop shadow effect to my text and the wind lines. So with the text selected, add the drop shadow effect. I'm using the FT toolbar, which you can get on ascripts.com. Right in the drop shadow effect, I'm going to increase the softness to like 5 pixels and maybe decrease the distance to 3. Let's copy the drop shadow effect and paste it on the wind lines. Now let's create a slightly different example of this whole look. I'm going to call the main comp main 1, and let's create a new composition, call it main 2. And into this composition I'm going to copy my background and my scratches and dust. Ctrl C on the keyboard and Ctrl V in this comp. Let's arrange the layers, put in the background at the bottom. Now in case I don't want to convert my text layer into shapes to have it still editable, I'm going to use an effect instead of the wiggle pass animator or transformer. Let's type my text, and this time I'm going to use a thicker font. I'm going to scale it down a bit and center it. Place it just between my elements and the background. From the effects and presets panel, I'm going to add the Ruffin edges effect, and using this effect I'm going to achieve the look which was achieved with the wiggle pass effect. I'm going to decrease the border a little bit to like 5% and decrease the scale to around 50, maybe 70. And now I'm going to increase the complexity and keyframe the evolution random seed, just like we did with the fractal noise. Hold Alt on the keyboard and click once on the stopwatch to add an expression, and again type random, open parentheses, 0,100 close parentheses, and it is going to produce a different pattern every frame. And so you have the same effect, and your text is still editable. I have also copied the adjustment layer with the posterized time effect, and that's how this whole composition looks. I'm also going to add the drop shadow effect to this layer, change its settings a little bit, increasing the softness and decreasing the distance, and decreasing the opacity as well, making it more subtle. And so that's another way to achieve the same effect. So in this tutorial we saw how to use a few simple After Effects tools to create an old movie look. We saw how to use a few effects inside of After Effects to our advantage. Maybe you did not think of using these effects this way before. We saw a few different techniques with shape layers, and finally composed all of the elements together to have our end result. Hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial and learned something new. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you have any other tutorials you would like to see, please let me know as well. I would really like to make them. I'm Daniel Brudeski for LesterBanks.com. Don't forget to check out the other tutorials on the site. Keep always updated with the new posts being posted every day. And I'll see you next time.